Okay, so today we're going to do exercise 223, and I apologize in advance, but the numbers this semester got messed up. So the numbers are kind of just there as reference. But we're going to do exercise 223, which is our exterior night rendering. And so by this point in the semester, given that there's only 5 class days left, now would be the time to have your model pretty well kind of taken care of. So I would expect it to be pretty done at this point. Today's exterior rendering might actually be able to be the final rendering that you turn in. So if your drawing's done, you'll have that ability, and you can make it your final rendering using the network render, etc. If of course you don't get to it, you'll have to do that sometime in the next couple weeks before the end of the semester. Remember that I require an interior and an exterior daytime rendering and an interior and an exterior nighttime rendering as part of the final. So there is more that's required as part of the final. The drawings are what we're going to. So we've done our renderings. I'm going to then show you how to do the drawings, and I'll start with that next class. So next Monday we'll start doing the drawings. I was at Berkeley, and I'll probably tell this story twice because I'll probably tell it on next Monday, but it's fresh in my head, so I don't want to forget to tell you this. So I was at Berkeley sitting on a panel for a construction class that I go to every spring. I sit on this panel, and of course I see a bunch of former students when I do that, and I always ask, like, how'd I do at estimating what you needed to know and whatever. And this particular student said I was spot on all of the Rhino stuff. Like, it was exactly what she needed to know, and it was extremely, extremely helpful going into studio knowing that. She said, the only thing I felt like I didn't know was how to make a drawing out of Rhino. And it's like, oh, but I spent 3 classes telling you how to do that. She's like, well, I kind of missed that idea of you can take Rhino and you can put it into Illustrator. And she's like, I missed that. So I made it a PDF, and then I ultimately made the PDF into Illustrator and whatever. So given that little piece of information that somehow that part got lost, the next 3 classes are important. It's something that you need to do, and apparently that was something that had to happen like on the first day. So it was a very relevant thing to learn. So we'll get to that. That's next class. We will end up doing plans, sections, and elevation views from your Rhino model. That's all on purpose because you should be able to do all this modeling work in Rhino and then be able to get your plan sections and elevations out. That would make sense. So we're going to go through that coming up. But in order to get there, you obviously have to have a fairly complete model. And I'm expecting it to be fairly complete at this point. So today we're going to do that exterior night rendering. I've opened up both of my files. The first one is my master site file. This is the one that I do the rendering in. This is the one that has the lights installed in it already. This is basically the one that has the site information, the ocean, etc. The other file that I have open is my base retreat. They look almost the same because the views happen to be kind of the same because I was working on this piece of art last class as part of my interior rendering. So we are, of course, switching from the interior to the exterior. I'm going to go through setting up those nighttime settings one more time, even though they're probably already set, because if you did the interior night rendering, you could pretty much swing to the outside and do the exterior night rendering. The difference is we need to add some more lights. So I'm going to add some more lights, and then I may go off on a few tangents and show you how to do some water and that kind of stuff, because it's how many times do I get to show you that sort of thing. So we're going to keep going. I'm going to switch over to my master site, and then I'm going to get my view out so that I can see the whole site and start to work with this whole site. I already had a view that was set up before. If I went into my set views and I went into my named views, I had an exterior 1 view. This was the daytime rendering that I performed earlier this semester. I could do the exact same view and just switch it to night. There's nothing wrong with that as a strategy. Or, of course, I could pick any other view, and I may end up picking a different view later on. But we'll start with this as a good place to start. So with this view already set up, now it's a matter of going through my settings. Well, first off, I need to go into my V-Ray options, and I need to make sure that my environment is set correctly. My guess is that it already is set correctly because I'm seeing the values in here. but I'm going to go through the process one more time just in case. I'm going to jump over to the Digital Tools site. I'll go to Resources, go to the V-Ray Materials Library, and then the Quick Rendering Setups. These are those files that I have prepped for you. We're doing a night rendering, so I need to be down here in one of the night renderings or in one of the sunsets. So I'm going to use the sunset scene 2. This is the one that I used last class, and that's fine. I already have downloaded this sunset scene, and I've already set my reflection and refraction background to 100. Remember, most of these settings can come in by just downloading this visopt file. If you click on the visopt file, it gives you an XML file. That's not what you want. Instead, right-click on it and say Save Link As, and save that visopt somewhere near where your other, or near where you've stored the HDRIs to begin with. When you go to load it, click on the Load button. But before you do, open one of the drawers so that you can confirm that it loads, because it'll close up all the drawers when you once you've loaded it. I'm going to click on the Load button here, and I'm going to go into my flash drive. I'll go into my Resources folder. I'm going to go into V-Ray, and then my V-Ray Materials. Oh, sorry, not V-Ray Materials, my V-Ray HDRI. There we go. And I have my sunsets, and I was working with this one. There's my settings, my visopt settings. I'll go ahead and open those visopt settings. The drawer closes. That confirms that it loaded in all the settings. I'll go back to my environment. I need to double check that these maps are installed correctly, the HDRIs. I'll go into the GI skylight first, click on the capital M. If I hit preview, I should see something. I'm seeing gray. There's a problem. Let me go find this EXR file. So it's on my flash drive. It is under, let's see, Resources, V-Ray, V-Ray HDRI, Sunsets, and this would be the ENV version. There it is. I'll go ahead and say Open. If I preview it, now it's black, so that's a good sign. I'll move on to my reflection and refraction background. Once again, I'll click on the M and go find the reference file. There it is, the 059 REF. And we'll go ahead and load that in as well. I'll say OK. So both of those environment settings have been done, which is a good sign. Next thing would be to go to the camera and check that the physical camera is on, which it is. My shutter speed is currently set to 50. Since I moved from the inside of the building to the outside of the building, I may need to adjust this value. So it may need to go up because suddenly I'm doing a rendering on the outside of the building. So I'm going to make sure that I keep an eye on that as I do that first test render to see if it shows up nicely. The other things that I can do, I can go into my system and I can turn on distributed rendering. This is going to be more and more valuable as the semester plays out. So get comfortable with doing this and turning it on and making sure that you actually harness the power of the network to do the render, not just your one computer. I'm going to check the box to turn it on, and then I'll go to Hosts. I'll click on Find Servers and wait. There it is. I've got 22 unused spawners. I'll go ahead and click on the Yes, and that'll load them in. Remember, as I check these, I'm only checking 5 at a time. So there's the first 5. I'll say OK. I'll go back to my button with the 3 dots, check the next 5. And this is something I discovered by accident. It wasn't something that was intentional, but it seems to work. So you probably could do more, but I've had good success with 5, so I'm doing 5 at a time. And those last 3, there they are. Once I've loaded them all, I'm going to click on the Resolve Servers button to resolve their addresses, and I'll go ahead and say OK. So distributed rendering is turned on. I'm ready to do that distributed rendering. I'll go to my output next, and I'm going to uncheck the lock, get the view aspect, so it's the current view aspect of the screen. Exactly what I see is what I'm getting. I'll click the lock again, and then I'm going to drop the size down. V-Ray crashed on me. That's nice. Appreciate that. There we go. And I'm going to drop that size down, so maybe I have 100 in height. 200. This is my test rendering to see if I like my lighting and whatever. So all of the V-Ray settings are right. Now I'm noticing one other problem, and that is that my sun appears to still be on. So I need to make sure that I go into my layers and I find my environment and I turn off my sun. So that sun needs to be turned off because obviously you can't have a nighttime rendering with the sun on. That wouldn't work. So with the sun off, I think I'm ready to do my first render that is a test. I'm going to go ahead and do a save real quick just in case. And then I'll go ahead and render. Remember, this is a small rendering just to confirm that the light settings are working. So it's not bad. It looks like the light settings are working. I'm getting some of those lights. I don't really like the sunset view. I think I'm going to switch to a fully dark view. And so you guys can watch me do this again. With one of the drawers open, I'll go in and I'll load. This time I'm going to load one of my night HDRIs. Never mind that one. How about this one? There we go. That one loads. I'll go back to my environment, make sure that my matte is set correctly. Is that the one that I picked? Yeah. All right, so I've loaded both of those in as my backgrounds. And I have to go back to my output. Let me get my view aspect. I'll lock it again, and I'll drop this height down to 100. Sounds pretty good. Let me check my system. Let me turn back on distributed rendering. My hosts are already there, so I'll just resolve my servers and say OK. And then we'll give this another test render and see if I like this one a little bit better. So it's much darker, and I can see a little bit. You guys can barely see it on the screen there. I can see a little bit of light coming out of my building, but I'm really not seeing enough light on the exterior of the building. So it's time to light up the exterior of the building. And so this is the other problem. We move to the exterior. If there's not enough light, we need to add some more light. So first off, I'm going to think through where in this would light really belong. Where would I install some light? Down in here, maybe I'd install some lights to light up this little porch area. Maybe, of course I could do the look at me lights where I have spotlights down here on the hillside shining up on the building. I could do that. Maybe I want to gently wash these walls with a little bit of light. Those would be strategies for how to light up the building. I'm going to do a wall wash just so that you can see me do that. And part of the reason that I'm doing this style of light is because it's a little bit different than the other lights that I've done. I'm going to create a rectangular light this time rather than a point light or a spotlight. And the thing about rectangular lights, and the reason that I don't emphasize them much early on, is because the settings are very, very arbitrary based on the size of the rectangle. So there's not as scriptive as I have a point light, I set the wattage to 40 watts, and it looks approximately like a 40-watt light bulb. The rectangular light doesn't work that way. Sometimes you have to increase the power. It depends on the size of the rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and create that rectangular light. I'm on my lights layer here. Let me add a sublayer for rectangular. And actually, I might do an R for rectangular dash wall, just so that I know if I put more rectangular lights in, I might change the layers here. There's my rectangular wall light. I'm going to install it right on this lip on the underside. So I'll come over here and I'm going to use this second one over on my V-Ray toolbar, which is the rectangular light. I'll click on it and it says rectangular light corner. So I'll pick this corner, this outermost corner, as my first corner. Then it says rectangular light length. So I'm going to go to the other corner right there. That's my length. And my rectangular light width is going to be back over to that corner. So I get my rectangular light, which is that long light. I get an arrow that's assigned to that rectangular light. That arrow tells me which direction the light is shining. So it's shining down. If you don't like the direction, if I wanted it shining up, I could type flip, and my direction arrow or my direction vector would be going up instead of down. I do in fact want it down, so I'm going to flip. Now the same rules apply to the last as the other types of lights. You don't want this light intersecting or coplanar with any other geometry. So let me look at this quickly in one of my side views because it'll be a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to move it so that it's down below my little overhang lip there. And I'm going to move it so that it's a little bit out from the wall. So if I zoom in, it's not intersecting with any of the geometry. So same rules apply as the other. So I can switch back. I can go into that exterior view. I can go back into my properties. I'm going to click on my light properties. And here I've got my set of properties. First off, of course, I want it enabled. Second thing would be color. I'll click on the color, 255, 214, and 170. And I'll go ahead and say, OK, there's my color. I'll change my units into watts. I still like the units in watts personally. I try to stick in that value range. And then I get to my intensity. And so the truth is, this is completely a guess. You just have to kind of guess at it and see. I'm going to start with 200. And we'll see what happens. A couple other things. So the rectangular light, unlike some of the other lights in V-Ray, we can technically see the rectangular light. So we can check the box to make it invisible if we don't want to see a glowing strip as part of it. If we wanted it shining in both directions, we could turn on double-sided, so it would be shining in both directions. I only want it in one direction, so I'll leave that unchecked. And the rest of these are all fine. The rest of the defaults are all fine. At this point, it's time to give this a test. So I have it installed, and I need to take a look. So let me switch back into that. Go to Set View, and I'm going to go back to that Exterior 1 view. There it is. And we'll go ahead and give it a render and see. Remember, I used that small rendering on purpose so that I can not overemphasize or not waste too much time doing the high-quality rendering. So there we are. We can see that it's showing up. We can see that it's washing the wall with light the way that I wanted to. I'm relatively happy. Now it's time to work through some of the other places where I might want lights. So I have one there. I'll create another one along this wall. So once again, I'll come back to my rectangular light. I'll zoom in here. And this one, I'm not going to go quite as far. We'll go maybe about there. And we'll go to right there. There it is. It's not, same settings here, watts. This rectangle isn't quite as big as that. No, they're about the same. So we'll go with the same 200. 255, 214, and 170. I'll say OK. It should be in radiant power, which it is. I'll make it invisible. The rest of the settings are OK. I do need, once again, to go into my side view and move it. So I'll go to Move. We'll move it down slightly, and we'll move it over slightly. And now I have this one and that one. So if I went back and did this render, I should see two places where it washes the wall instead of just one. And so now we're getting those lights working. So that's starting to feel pretty good. Now maybe I want to install some uplights shining from here looking up at the building. Now, of course, on any of these lights, if I wanted to show the geometry of the light and have the fixture and the bulb, I could create the light and insert it the same way we've been doing. Right now, I'm concentrating on just getting the night rendering to look right, as opposed to creating the geometry for it. Let me go in and do a spotlight this time. So I'll create my spotlight again. I'm going to start it from the middle of this. Let's do a 1 foot radius, and let's do a 1 foot height. So let's do 1 foot again. There it is. Now this, of course, is not at all in the plane that I want it to be in. I want it to be shining up at the building. So let me do a rotate in the right view. So I'll type rotate. I'm going to rotate around that point, and we're going to make it go up toward the building. I don't want it snapping, so I'm going to turn off ortho, and I'm going to shine it up toward the building. And then I'm going to move this down so that it's in line with this particular post. I'll go through and do my settings. Color, 255, 214, and 170. There it is. I'll do a radiant power, inverse square to K. So all of this shouldn't look different to you. It's something we've already been doing. And my wattage, I'm going to go a little bit soft. I'll go maybe 20 watts because I'm going to do multiples of these. So there's my first one. Let me look at it in the plan view. And let me go ahead and, in the plan view, copy. And I'm going to turn ortho back on. And I'm going to put one on each of these little posts. All right, so I have one on each of those little posts. And now we can switch back into that exterior 1 view. So let me go to set view, exterior 1. We'll zoom in a little bit, and we'll do another little test render. So each time I add these lights, I'm going through and I'm double checking that I like the end result. Oops, sorry, wrong one. So we can see that those lights are shining nicely on the building, illuminating a little bit of the building itself. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with how this is starting to turn out. I need some more lights inside the building. That's the other thing that people tend to forget about a nighttime rendering. And I'm sorry you can't see this as well as I can. The other thing about a nighttime rendering is if you are underlit inside the building, it doesn't look as good. So make sure you have enough lights inside. I don't have enough lights in these 2 front rooms to really show much of what's going on. So let me go ahead and add those right now. If I switch for just a second into wireframe mode, as messy as it is, I can go in and I can grab these lights from this back room. And I can copy them. And I'm going to copy from this front corner, right? There, and I'll copy them over to the front corner of the room right there, and I'll go down a floor and copy them to right there. Essentially, I'm throwing some lights into those 2 front rooms. Probably wouldn't be bad for me to put a few more lights up top here. So let me take off these and copy once again from that point, and I'm going to go up to the top and put those in. These probably need to move so that they're a little bit more in line with the building. We'll move those over, something like that. Again, I'm just throwing some lights in there so we have a little bit more light in the building to begin with. So I have all of those lights installed. Now I can go back to that exterior 1 view, and we can do another rendering. So now, in this view, we can see that there's a lot more light coming from the inside of the building. And that's a big part of the night view, is getting that light from the inside out, because a lot of building lighting comes from that inside. So I've worked through those various pieces. At this point, I could go ahead and do a higher quality render. I need a couple more things inserted into this scene. My grass is pretty awful down here. and I can change that using what's called a bunch grass block. I can make grass in Rhino and V-Ray and render it and get myself grass, or I can fix that in Photoshop. And I think one of the important things at this point for you to understand is that you could spend 100% of your time in V-Ray and get a perfect rendering. You could spend 100% of your time in Photoshop and theoretically get a perfect rendering. Or you could spend half that total time using a combination of Photoshop and V-Ray. So if you can get proficient at both Photoshop and V-Ray, you can cut the amount of time it takes you to create a good quality rendering down dramatically. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. I want to show you another thing which is going to be relevant for some people, and for some of you, you just want to start working and put your heads down. Some of you have already done that anyway, if I'm being honest. But some people want to know how to deal with lit water, and that's kind of like the fun end rendering. So I'm going to do a quick one with some lit water. First thing I have to do is to actually make the thing to hold the water. So I'll switch back over into my base retreat file. And I've done pools and hot tubs and stuff before. I have no idea exactly what I want to create this time. I'm making it up on the fly. But let's go ahead and let's do a fountain this time. And so I'll add a fountain on the back of this wall. So I'll start by creating the geometry. So let me get a box corner to corner. I'll start in that corner. And I'm just going to make it big to start, and then I'll adjust it later. Let's make that box 24 inches high. And let's do a scale 1D on it. And let's make it 3 feet. Oops. Looks like my box was floating there. Here, let's try that one more time. Scale 1D. Did I say scale 1D? Why is this changing? One more time. Sorry. Scale 1D. There to there. We'll say 3 feet. And let's shrink this down just a little bit so it's not quite so big on the wall. Something like that. So I'm starting with that geometry. Let me duplicate my edge here, here, there, and there. I'm going to join those, and then I'll offset those by, I don't know, 6 inches, like that, to create an interior. I'll explode this. Actually, I didn't have to explode it. Let me use the make whole command. I'll come over here to the Boolean operations. I'll use make whole. Deselect everything. Make whole. Select planar closed curves. That's my curve. That's my surface. Let's drop that down by 4 inches as my depth. There we go. So I'm quickly making that little shape to hold the water. Now I need to actually put some water in there, and I also need to build a little bit more geometry. So let me take this and hide it. Oops, sorry. Explode and then hide. Explode. Let me take that stop surface and hide. The way that the water works, it kind of needs something underneath to contain the water. So I'll make another little box from right there to right there. And we'll go down with another foot or so. That was supposed to be a negative foot. Sorry. -1 foot. Take that and explode. Take the top surface there and delete it. And essentially, I'm creating that piece. Let me show that hidden piece of geometry. And now I have essentially the fountain. So a couple more things. One, I need the material on the concrete here. So let me go ahead and just match that material to this wall. So we'll make it all match and as if it was all part of the same pour. So I'll take everything that I just created, there, there, there. I'm not going to do the inside just yet. All of those pieces. I'll come over to my texture mapping, and I'm going to choose match mapping. My source object will be that. And if I were to switch over into my rendered view, oh, I haven't applied the material yet. Sorry. Let me go into my materials. I probably should have done some layers here. Let's get organized. Sublayer fountain. Sublayer for fountain, water. Tile. And I don't know, base. These objects should all be on the base layer. Let me change object layer. This object here is going to be my water. So let's change object there. And my interior, all of this, I'm going to make my tile. So let me hide this. And I'll take all of these interior pieces. There we go, and I'll put those in tile here. Change object layer. There we go. And come back and show, and then I need to apply some materials. So first off, the base needs to be concrete. Let me go into my V-Ray materials. And concrete, I have a rough board form applied, so I'll right-click and say apply this material to layer, and it's going to go on the fountain, if I can find fountain. There we go, fountain, base, concrete's applied. The water needs to have the fountain water applied. So I'm going to right-click on Scene Materials and go to Load Material. In the V-Ray library of materials, under Water, there should be 3 different options. We have fountain, we have lake, and we have ocean. For things like fountains and pools and that sort of stuff, smaller bodies of water, pick the fountain. So I'll double-click. I'll load up the water fountain. And it should be listed as water fountain. I actually ended up loading it twice. Let me right-click and say apply material to layer. And I'll put that on the water layer. There it is. The last thing I need is my interior. So what is that interior going to look like? Is it going to be tile or what? I have no idea what material is going to look that good right now. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to create a colored material for right now. Let me go to standard and we'll make that material kind of a light blue or something. I'll rename this to tile and I'll right click and say apply material to layer, and we'll put it on that tile later. There it is. So I've quickly made up that water fountain. At this point, I'll go ahead and save it. I'll go to File and then Save. Remember, that was done in my base. Now it's time to jump over into my master site file. Here it is. And I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. And now I'll be able to load up that new retreat that has my fountain in it. All right. So at this point, I obviously need to switch my view such that I'm seeing the fountain. So that's important. So let's get myself down into a view where I'm starting to see the fountain. Maybe like this. This is a pretty small space, so I might change to have an 18mm camera instead of the 28 that I was working with. And so now I'm looking at this wall, I'm looking at my little fountain. Okay, this seems pretty good. At this point, if I switch to a day render, we'd be able to see the fountain, but a night render, it's still pretty dark. So I'm not going to see too much of the fountain. So I need to actually add some light to this as well. So I'll get to that. Let me show you the day render really quick. So if I want to switch from night to day, I'll go to my V-Ray options, and I'm going to save my V-Ray options. This was my successful night settings. So let me go to my actual assignment 205 folder. I have VisOps. This was my night environment exterior. I'll go ahead and save. And that way I can come back and reload it. I'll go back to my load, same folder. There was my day that I saved previously. I'll go ahead and say open, and that will then load in the day settings for me. There we go. And I can start with just rendering. Let me go into my options. Let me go to my output, make sure it's set for small. So let's do it only at 100. And we'll do the rendering just to check. I forgot to turn the sun on. Go back to my layers, environment, turn that sun on. There it is. And I'm not worried so much about turning off the other lights. They can still be on. They're not going to affect too much of what's going on. I think my blue tile is a little bit much. I think I'm going to switch to a light gray. Yeah, it's overpowering the fountain there. So let me switch that material to a light gray instead. Okay. And then I can do another rendering. But the point is it's all showing up. Now, if I switch back to the night, I'm going to have to install a light inside of this. So once again, I'll use that rectangular light. I'll come back to my rectangular light, and I'll draw it so that it fits inside of this geometry. So one side to the other. There we go. And we'll come over like that. This one happens to be pointing up. That's good. That's the direction I want it to go. But I need to move it down so that it's under the surface of the water. So we'll drop it down just a little bit. Probably about like that. Sometimes it's useful to see that in one of the side views here. Make sure it looks like it's on an angle. Let me recreate that one more time here. And I should have saved this view first. Set view, named views. Exterior 2. All right. Let me recreate that light here real quick. Rectangular light. We're going to go from there to there and straight across to there. Then we're going to push that rectangular light down just a bit. Let me move it. I'm doing this in the side view to make it a little bit easier. There it is. So this light is going to have some different properties. So first off, under my light settings here, my color is not going to be the same anymore because this is a light that's underwater. So in this case, using a bluish color is not a bad thing. So I'm going to go into kind of a light blue color, something like that. I'm going to turn this into watts, and I'm also going to increase the power by a fair amount. So we'll go to maybe, I don't know, 200 or so. We want it to be invisible. We don't need it to be double-sided. The rest of the options are all OK for right now. I may need to adjust this color. We'll see. So let me switch back into my exterior 2 view. There it is. And I also need to go back into night settings. So I'll go back to V-Ray options. I'll load my exterior night settings. Everything resets for me. And now we can go ahead and do a render and see if it feels right. Oops, sun's on. Go back to my layers. Environment, sun, that needs to go off. And now we can render again. So my pool might have a bit too strong of a light in it. But I also might find that I just need to increase the power of the rendering and the resolution of the rendering to really tell if it's too much. So I can tell that it's enough to actually start to see the water, and I'm starting to see the reflection. All of that feels pretty good. What I'm going to do at this point is I'll run a much higher quality rendering so you can see the final output, but I don't want you to have to sit here and listen to me talk while the whole time. I mean, that would fill up like a half hour's worth of time, and you don't need to waste your time doing that. And then I'll show you the higher quality version at the very end. Okay? But I at least like to introduce the concept of the water rendering so that you can see what it looks like. I'll do a day and a night so you can see it in both by the end today. The rest of today you have to get ready for this exterior night rendering, install those additional lights, get prepped for it essentially. Hopefully you can even run the exterior render. I'd be very happy if you did that. By next week, on Monday, you need to be ready to start doing plans and sections and elevations, because that's what we're moving into. And so we just don't have time to keep modeling. So it's time to finish up and wrap up on the modeling, and then we'll be able to go from there. Okay? Sounds good. I did run a group of 3D prints this morning. So a few of you have 3D prints. There's a couple more still running on the machines. Out of all the uploads for assignment 203, I had 10 people include object files of however many you are. So that wasn't too many. Furthermore, of the 10 that did include object files, only 6 of them actually worked. So it shows you how the odds kind of play out. So I'll come around and I'll talk to you if yours didn't work. Generally speaking, the ones that didn't work were because the object was too far away from the origin, and you had to take that object and move it closer to the origin in order to run it. So if you haven't uploaded your object file to be able to 3D print this, please do it. It should be either part of your assignment 203 post or its own post that's tagged as assignment 203. I need to be able to find it. Don't have it tagged as an exercise or whatever. I need to be able to find it easily. What I will do next week and the week after is when I get here at 6:40 in the morning, I'll start the job running, which means that it should be done by class time or towards the end of class time, so you'll all get one of these to take home, which is the goal. So if I tell you your object file didn't work, try to relocate it closer to the center, double check your settings, make sure it's watertight, and that sort of thing. Create a new post with a new object file tagged as 203. That way I'll see it, and I'll download it, and I'll see if I can get it started. I think that's about it when it comes to the object files. But they turn out pretty cool. Kristen's turned out really nice. Or maybe kind of a squishy shampoo bottle. One or the other. I don't know. I think it's kind of nice. So anyway, when you get yours, you can have a good look at it and learn. It's very interesting to see your building as an object as opposed to as something you've been rendering and working on. So anyway, that's where we are. I'll do the higher quality rendering so you guys can see it, and then you're free for the rest of the class to keep working.